The pale light of dawn began to stretch across the snow-covered fields, casting long shadows from the farmer's barn. The air was crisp and biting, the kind of cold that sank into your bones, making every breath feel like ice. The world outside was silent, save for the crunch of frozen ground beneath the farmer's boots as he stepped onto the porch, his breath visible in the early morning chill. He had been up since the first glimmer of light, tending to the animals, but this morning felt different. In the distance, the silhouette of a large figure caught his eye, an unusual sight on a winter's morning. As he squinted through the frost-laden air, his heart skipped a beat. There, standing against the fading shadows of the night, was a mare. But this was no ordinary mare. She was enormous, towering over any horse he had ever seen, her coat a deep, mysterious shade of gray. And as if that weren't strange enough, surrounding her were 8 foals thin, trembling, and barely able to stand in the freezing cold. The farmer's instincts kicked in immediately. He had seen his fair share of hardship on the farm, but this felt different. Something in the way the mare watched him with calm, intelligent eyes made his skin prickle. It was as though she was waiting for him to do something important. Without thinking, he turned and hurried into the barn. He knew what he had to do. But as he ushered the foals inside and closed the barn door behind them, a strange thought lingered in his mind. Why had they come here? And what was the true purpose of this giant mare? The answer, he felt deep in his bones, was just beginning to reveal itself. The barn creaked under the weight of the cold, the wooden beams groaning as if it too had been weathered by the long winter. Inside, the scent of hay and old leather filled the air, a comforting reminder of the farmer's routine. But today, the barn felt different, warmer, somehow, though the wind outside howled like a wolf in search of prey. The foals, their fragile bodies shivering violently, crowded together in a corner of the barn. They were too young to be out in such a brutal storm, their little limbs barely able to support them as they huddled close to one another for warmth. The farmer quickly went to work, spreading hay on the cold ground, using his rough hands to gather blankets and old quilts from the barn's loft. He moved with purpose, but his mind kept drifting back to the mare. As the foals settled into their new warmth, the giant mare entered the barn, her hooves clacking softly on the wooden floor. She was much taller than the farmer, her shoulders broad and powerful, and yet she moved with the grace of a creature meant to roam wide open plains. The mare's coat gleamed silver in the dim light, reflecting a soft glow like moonlight on a still lake. Her mane flowed like liquid smoke, cascading in gentle waves with every step. The farmer paused for a moment, staring at her in awe. There was something about her, something that made his heart race with a mixture of wonder and fear. He had raised horses for most of his life, but this mare was unlike any he had ever seen. There was a quiet strength in her presence, as though she wasn't just a creature of flesh and bone but something more. Something ancient. "Easy now, girl," the farmer muttered under his breath, stepping cautiously toward her. He reached out, his hand hovering near her neck, unsure if he should touch her. But the mare lowered her head slightly, allowing him to brush his fingers against her sleek coat. The moment his skin made contact, a rush of warmth spread through him. It wasn't just from the mare's body heat, no, it felt as if her very energy had surged into him, as if she were giving him strength, or perhaps, warning him. The foals, too, seemed to feel it. They stopped shivering, their eyes brightening, and their breathing steadied as they turned their heads toward the mare. She stood quietly among them, watching over them like a protector. There was no doubt in the farmer's mind now this was no ordinary horse. She wasn't just seeking shelter, she had come for a reason. His thoughts raced. Why had she brought the foals here? Why had she chosen his farm? The idea of wild horses, of untamed creatures of legend, was something he'd heard about in old stories passed down through generations. But this was different. There was magic in the air, subtle but undeniable. As the mare lowered her head to nuzzle the foals, a soft melodic sound escaped from her almost like a song. The farmer froze, listening closely. It was a strange sound, not a whinny or neigh, but something more, like a whisper from the very earth itself. He had never heard anything like it before. His heart beat faster, a mix of awe and confusion swirling in his chest. Just then, the wind howled louder outside, and the farmer noticed that the temperature in the barn had changed. It wasn't the same cold that had plagued the world just moments before. The chill had softened, replaced by a strange warmth that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the barn. The frost on the windows began to melt, and even the old wood felt less brittle, as if the barn itself had been given new life. The mare, sensing his confusion, turned to face him. Her eyes, dark and endless, met his with a quiet intensity. It was as if she were trying to communicate, as if she knew he was searching for answers, but she wasn't ready to give them just yet. The only thing she offered in return was the faintest of nods, as if to say, "Trust me." The foals, now resting peacefully under the protection of the mare, seemed to grow stronger with every passing moment. The change was subtle, but noticeable. One foal, who had been barely able to stand earlier, was now on his feet, gingerly taking small steps. Another nuzzled the mare's side, and she responded with a gentle nudge of her own, as though reassuring them. The farmer's mind raced. Had the mare healed them? Was this some kind of miracle? Or was something far more extraordinary at play? Whatever the case, he knew that what had come to his farm was no ordinary event. Something greater was unfolding before him, and whether he was ready for it or not, he was now part of it. The warmth in the barn was undeniable now, but it wasn't enough to erase the deep worry that gnawed at the farmer's heart. The foals, though no longer shivering, still looked weak, their bodies too frail to recover fully from the night's ordeal. They huddled close to the giant mare, their fragile forms pressed against her sides as if her presence alone could somehow keep them alive. The farmer crouched down beside the foals, his hands trembling as he gently stroked their coats. One foal, a small chestnut with white markings on its legs, let out a faint whinny, its breath ragged and shallow. The farmer's heart tightened in his chest. He'd seen animals struggle through cold winters before, but this felt different. These foals were not just sick or exhausted, they were on the brink of something more dangerous. He had no doubt that had they not found shelter in his barn, they would not have lasted through the night. "Hang on, little ones," he whispered, his voice raw with worry. The mare stood still, observing the scene with a calm patience. Her steady gaze never wavered from the foals, and she seemed to radiate an energy that kept them close to her, sheltered from the worst of the cold. But even she, for all her strength, couldn't prevent the toll that the storm had already taken. The foals' limbs were stiff, and their small bodies were covered in a thin layer of frost, their eyes dull and unfocused. The farmer rushed to fetch more blankets, grabbing whatever he could find to cover the foals and give them more warmth. He tried to coax them into drinking some warm water from a bucket he had placed by the barn stove. But they barely responded, their heads hanging low, their bodies trembling under the weight of their exhaustion. He could feel a sense of desperation rising in his chest. He was losing them. It was then that he noticed something strange. As he reached down to lift one of the foals, his fingers brushed against the mare's neck. The moment they made contact, a jolt of energy shot through him, a warm, electric pulse that seemed to travel from the mare's body into his. He stepped back, startled, but the mare didn't move. She only looked at him with that same quiet intensity. For a moment, the farmer thought he had imagined it. But then, he saw the foals' eyes flicker with a spark of life. Their bodies, which had seemed so still and lifeless just moments before, began to twitch, their muscles slowly coming back to life. The mare stepped forward, lowering her head to nuzzle the chestnut foal, and he responded by taking a small, shaky step toward her. The farmer, overcome with awe, watched as the foal managed to stand on all four legs, albeit unsteadily. It was a small victory, but it was enough to give him hope. But then, another foal, a pale gray one, let out a high-pitched whinny, its legs buckling beneath it. The farmer's heart sank as the foal collapsed to the ground, unable to regain its footing. Panic rose within him. "No, not you too," he muttered, rushing to the foal's side. His hands shook as he tried to help it up, but it was no use. The foal's tiny body was too weak, too worn out from the storm, and there was nothing the farmer could do to make it stand. His thoughts raced. The storm outside was still raging, and with every minute that passed, the temperature in the barn seemed to dip lower. The strange warmth from earlier was fading, and the icy gusts from the wind crept in through the gaps in the walls. The farmer could feel it. A chill, colder than any normal winter breeze, was creeping back into the barn, pushing against the fragile warmth that had once settled there. It was as though the world outside was conspiring against them, testing their will to survive. The barn's once welcoming heat seemed to evaporate with every passing second, and the sound of the wind howling through the cracks in the barn walls sent a shiver down the farmer's spine. His breath fogged in the air, and for the first time since he had brought the foals inside, he felt truly afraid. The mare lifted her head, sensing the shift in the air. Her ears twitched, and her body grew tense. She turned toward the door, and for the first time, the farmer saw something unfamiliar in her eyes. Was it fear? Determination? He couldn't be sure, but the message was clear. There was more to this than just sheltering the foals from the storm. The foals weren't merely trying to survive the night, they were in the midst of something far greater, something the mare had been sent to protect them from. The farmer felt a sense of urgency tighten in his chest. He couldn't afford to lose them. Not now. Not when they were so close to recovery. "Please, hang on," he whispered, his voice trembling. The storm outside raged with growing intensity, its howls turning to deafening roars. Inside the barn, the farmer felt a mounting sense of dread and unease that gripped his chest and tightened with every passing moment. The foals were still weak, their breaths shallow, and the mare stood silent, an enigmatic force of nature. But something had changed in the air. The barn seemed alive, pulsing with energy, and it wasn't just the foals stirring, it was the very atmosphere around him. The mare moved closer, her massive form towering over him, her eyes locked onto his with an unspoken urgency. As her presence drew nearer, the temperature in the barn shifted, once more warmth flooding in where there had once been cold. A voice clear, but not heard with the ears, spoke inside his mind. "The time has come," it said, and the farmer's heart skipped in his chest. The mare's eyes flashed, and in that instant, he understood. The foals were not ordinary creatures. They were part of something ancient, a prophecy that had been foretold long ago. They weren't just meant to survive the storm, they were the protectors, the guardians of balance. Their power had yet to awaken fully, but when it did, they would rise to confront the darkness that threatened the world. The storm wasn't just a force of nature, it was a manifestation of this darkness, a threat that would destroy everything unless the foals fulfilled their destiny. And the farmer, by bringing them into the barn, had unwittingly become a part of it. "You are the key," the mare's voice echoed in his mind, her gaze intense and knowing. "Without you, they will not survive. The balance depends on you." The farmer's legs shook as he absorbed the weight of her words. He wasn't just a farmer anymore. He was part of something far greater, a protector, a guide. And the foals, their fragile lives now a beacon of hope, had come to him for a reason. Outside, the storm began to wane, but the battle was far from over. The true journey was only just beginning. The storm outside seemed to take on a life of its own, its fury intensifying as though it sensed the foals awakening. The wind howled like a beast, its icy claws scraping against the barn's weathered walls. Inside, the barn felt charged with a new energy, as though the air itself was holding its breath. The mare stood unwavering, her massive form at the center of the barn, her gaze fixed on the farmer. The foals, now stirring with newfound strength, huddled near her, their tiny bodies glowing faintly, as though they were absorbing the energy of the mare herself. The warmth in the barn grew, yet the storm outside pressed in with increasing violence. The farmer, his heart pounding, knew they had little time. The prophecy was real, and the darkness that threatened the foals was already beginning to close in. He could feel it, the cold creeping back into the barn, the air growing heavy with something sinister. But the mare wasn't afraid. She stood like a sentinel, guarding them all. He rushed to reinforce the barn, shoring up the door and windows against the increasing wind. With every board he nailed into place, he could hear the mare's calming presence, her energy a steady force that made him move faster, with more purpose. He wasn't just protecting his barn anymore, he was protecting the future. The foals, no longer fragile and weak, began to move with more purpose. They stood, their legs steady, their eyes full of an ancient knowledge the farmer couldn't fully grasp. The chestnut foal, who had been on the brink of collapse just hours ago, now stood tall beside the mare, its small body glowing with an ethereal light. The storm outside seemed to bend around them, as though the foals were a beacon of hope that the darkness couldn't touch. The mare turned her head toward the farmer, her eyes softening with approval. He could feel her silent command, "Stay close, keep them safe." And in that moment, the farmer realized he was no longer just a caretaker. He was part of the protection, part of the prophecy that would see the foals through the storm. As the winds howled, the storm began to lose its force, the energy in the barn growing stronger. The foals' glow intensified, and with it, the storm's grip on the world outside loosened. The battle was far from over, but for now, they were safe. The mare had kept them warm, had kept them alive. And the farmer had found his place in their journey. The storm had finally passed, its fury retreating into the distance, leaving only the soft whisper of wind in the trees. The barn was still, and the air was warmer than it had been in hours. The foals, now fully recovered, stood proudly beside the mare, their tiny bodies glowing with an ethereal light. They no longer looked fragile, they had become something more, something greater than the farmer had ever imagined. He stood at the doorway, watching them, feeling the weight of everything that had just occurred. The mare, ever watchful, met his gaze once more. Her eyes seemed to say it all. This is only the beginning. The foals, with their newfound strength, nuzzled the mare gently, their tiny hooves taking tentative steps as if ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They were no longer just animals, they were the future, the guardians of balance, the protectors of something far beyond the farmer's understanding. As the first rays of dawn broke through the barn's windows, the farmer realized that his life would never be the same. He had been a simple man, content with his farm and the animals he cared for. But now, he was part of something ancient, something destined to shape the world. The mare turned, her body moving with a quiet grace. She led the foals toward the open door, and for the first time, the farmer saw what she had been waiting for, the path ahead. He watched them leave, a sense of peace settling over him. He had done his part. The foals were ready, and their journey was just beginning.